I found the lien notice tucked into my mailbox on a Tuesday afternoon in September, wedged between a grocery store flyer and a credit card offer. At first, I thought it was junk mail, another scam trying to scare homeowners into buying unnecessary services. But the Clark County Recorder's office seal in the corner made my stomach drop. According to this document, my house at 847 Magnolia Drive in Henderson, Nevada, had a $50,000 lien against it, recorded 3 months ago. I had never borrowed that money, never signed any papers, and certainly never authorized anyone to use my home as collateral. My name is Quentin Kowalski, and I had lived in Sunset Ridge Estates for 6 years. The development sprawled across 40 acres of desert landscape, with neat rows of Spanish-style homes painted in approved shades of beige and tan. Palm trees lined the streets, their fronds rustling in the dry wind that swept down from the mountains. When my wife died 4 years ago, this place had been a sanctuary. The neighbors kept to themselves mostly, and the HOA fees seemed reasonable at $200 a month. I worked as an electrical contractor, kept my lawn green despite the desert heat, and never caused problems. I read the lien notice 3 times before my hands started shaking. The document listed Silver Peak Management Company as the lender and Sunset Ridge, HOA, as the borrower. The legal description matched my property exactly. My address, my lot number, my home. I grabbed my phone and called the number on the letterhead, but got an automated message saying the office was closed for the day. It was only 3 in the afternoon. My next call went to Marcus Chen, who lived 2 doors down. Marcus was a retired accountant with a sharp mind for numbers and an even sharper distrust of authority. He answered on the second ring. "Marcus, it's Quentin. Did you get any weird mail today? Something from the county recorder?" "Funny you should ask," Marcus said slowly. "I've got a lien notice sitting on my kitchen table right now, $45,000 against my property. I've been trying to figure out if it's legitimate or some kind of identity theft." My chest tightened. "Same here, 50,000. The HOA is listed as the borrower." "The HOA?" Marcus's voice sharpened. "That doesn't make any sense. They can't just borrow money against our homes without our permission." I didn't think so either, but here's the paperwork with the county seal on it. "Give me an hour," Marcus said. "I'm going to make some calls." I spent that hour pacing my living room, staring at the lien notice and trying to remember anything unusual from the past few months. The HOA had held its annual meeting in June, but I hadn't attended. The minutes arrived by email a week later, listing routine maintenance projects and budget approvals. Nothing about borrowing money or using homeowner properties as collateral. I pulled up the email and read through it again, but found nothing suspicious. Marcus called back exactly 63 minutes later. "Quentin, we've got a problem. I just talked to Jennifer Holbrook across the street. She got one too. 38,000. So did the Patels on Ocotillo Court and the Johnsons on Desert Willow. I'm hearing it's not just a few houses, it might be the entire subdivision." Jesus Christ! I sank onto my couch. How's that even possible? "I don't know, but we need to find out fast. Can you be at my house at 7 tonight? I'm putting together an emergency meeting." By 7 o'clock, Marcus's living room was packed with 23 homeowners, all clutching similar lien notices. The amounts varied from $35,000 to $72,000, but the pattern was identical. Silver Peak Management Company as lender, Sunset Ridge HOA as borrower, our homes as collateral. The room buzzed with angry voices and confused questions. Jennifer Holbrook, a real estate agent with platinum blonde hair and a no-nonsense attitude, stood up and waved her notice in the air. "I've been selling houses in Nevada for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like this. You can't just encumber someone's property without their signature. It's fraud, plain and simple." "Unless we signed something without realizing it," suggested David Patel, a software engineer who looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Could there have been language in the HOA documents we signed when we bought our houses?" Marcus shook his head. "I pulled my closing documents this afternoon. The CC and Rs give the HOA authority to levy assessments and place liens for unpaid dues, but there's nothing about using our properties as collateral for loans, nothing even close." "Where's Patricia?" someone called out. Patricia Hoffman was the HOA president, a middle-aged woman with helmet-like brown hair who took her position very seriously. She sent regular emails about pool hours, landscaping standards, and the importance of maintaining property values. I had never particularly liked her, but I'd always assumed she was just overly enthusiastic about HOA rules. "I drove by her house before coming here," Jennifer said. "Her car's in the garage, but she didn't answer the door. I left 3 voicemails." "What about the other board members?" I asked. Marcus consulted a list. "President is Patricia Hoffman. Vice President is Donald Simmons. He's actually in Seattle this week for work. Treasurer is Linda Walsh, and Secretary is Gregory Banks. I've left messages for all of them." My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor, Catherine Frost. "Just found lien notice. What's happening? Can you fill me in?" I texted back quickly, then noticed several other people in the room checking their phones. Word was spreading fast through the neighborhood. "We need a lawyer," Jennifer said firmly. "This is way beyond what we can handle ourselves." "I know someone," offered a woman I didn't recognize. She introduced herself as Rachel Nguyen from Saguaro Street. "My cousin's a real estate attorney in Las Vegas. Let me give her a call." While Rachel stepped outside to make the call, the rest of us compared our lien notices in more detail. The recording dates were all within a 2-week period in late June. The loan numbers were sequential, suggesting they had all been processed together as part of a single transaction. The notary signatures were identical on every document, someone named Beverly Strickland. "Does anyone know Beverly Strickland?" Marcus asked. Nobody did. Rachel returned after 10 minutes, looking troubled. "My cousin says this is serious, really serious. If these liens are legitimate, and if the HOA defaults on the loan, the lender could potentially foreclose on our homes. She's recommending we hire a real estate litigation attorney immediately, and she's giving me a name. Andrew Carpenter. He's got an office downtown." The room erupted in overlapping voices. Foreclose? On homes we owned free and clear, or had been diligently paying mortgages on for years. The injustice of it burned in my gut. I had worked construction jobs in 100-degree heat to pay off my mortgage early after my wife's medical bills. Every payment had been a struggle, and I had made the final one just 8 months ago. The pride I felt when the bank sent me the release of lien had been one of the few bright moments in a difficult year. "Everyone, quiet down," Marcus said, raising his voice. "We need to be systematic about this. First, we need to figure out how many homes are affected. Second, we need to document everything. Third, we need legal representation. Who's willing to chip in for an attorney consultation?" Every hand in the room went up. Over the next 2 days, our informal group grew rapidly. By Thursday evening, we had confirmed that 40 families in Sunset Ridge Estates had received lien notices. The total amount borrowed against our properties exceeded $2 million. We still hadn't heard from Patricia Hoffman or any other board member except Donald Simmons, who sent a terse email from Seattle saying he knew nothing about any loans and had not authorized any such action. I took Friday off work to attend an emergency consultation with Andrew Carpenter. 15 of us crammed into his conference room on the 10th floor of an office building overlooking the Las Vegas Strip. Carpenter was in his early 50s with steel gray hair and the kind of calm demeanor that immediately put people at ease. He listened without interrupting as we explained the situation, passing around copies of our lien notices for his review. When we finished, Carpenter leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "This is one of the most brazen cases of HOA fraud I've encountered, and I've seen quite a few. Here's what I believe happened based on these documents. Someone with access to the HOA's legal authority executed a loan agreement with Silver Peak Management Company, using your properties as collateral. They likely forged board meeting minutes approving the loan, forged authorization documents, and had a notary sign off on everything." "But how could the county recorder accept these?" Jennifer asked. "Don't they verify anything?" "The recorder's office just verifies that documents are properly formatted and notarized," Carpenter explained. "They don't investigate the underlying authority or authenticity. If someone presents a lien with the correct legal descriptions, proper formatting, and a notary seal, the recorder will file it. That's why this kind of fraud is possible." "What happens to the money?" I asked. "Where did $2 million go?" "That's the key question," Carpenter said. "If we can trace the funds, we can potentially recover them and prove criminal intent. But first, we need to act fast to protect your homes. I'm recommending we file a lawsuit immediately against the HOA, the board members individually, Silver Peak Management Company, and anyone else involved in this scheme. We'll also need to file a notice of pending litigation against each property to alert potential buyers or lenders that there's a legal dispute. How much is this going to cost? Asked Robert Martinez, a construction foreman who lived on Palo Verde Lane. Carpenter pulled out a fee agreement. For a case this complex with 40 plaintiffs, I'm proposing a hybrid arrangement. A modest retainer of $2,000 per household, plus 30% of any funds we recover. If you win, you'll get 70% of the recovered money plus attorney fees from the defendants. If we lose, you're only out the retainer. The room fell silent as people did mental math. $2,000 was a lot of money, especially for families already stressed about the liens against their homes, but losing our houses to foreclosure would be infinitely worse. I'm in, I said. Me too, Marcus added. One by one, the others agreed. By Monday morning, Carpenter had filed a lawsuit in Clark County District Court. The complaint named Patricia Hoffman, Linda Walsh, Gregory Banks, and Donald Simmons as defendants, along with the Sunset Ridge HOA, Silver Peak Management Company, and a notary named Beverly Strickland. We alleged fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, negligent misrepresentation, and violation of Nevada's HOA statutes. The lawsuit demanded immediate removal of the liens, return of any funds taken, punitive damages, and attorney fees. The press picked up the story that afternoon. A local news station sent a reporter to interview several of us in Marcus's driveway. By evening, our story was the lead on the 6 o'clock news. HOA fraud leaves 40 families at risk of losing their homes, the headline declared. My phone rang off the hook with calls from reporters, concerned neighbors, and even a few attorneys offering their services. Tuesday morning, Patricia Hoffman finally surfaced. Her attorney issued a statement claiming Patricia had no knowledge of any loans and suggesting that Linda Walsh, the treasurer, had acted without board authorization. Linda Walsh responded with her own attorney, who claimed Linda had merely processed paperwork approved by Patricia. The finger-pointing had begun. Carpenter obtained an emergency hearing for Thursday afternoon. Judge Margaret Bellamy, a stern woman in her 60s with a reputation for not tolerating nonsense, reviewed our motion for a temporary restraining order. We needed the court to freeze any movement of the loan funds and prevent Silver Peak Management Company from taking any action on the liens. I sat in the courtroom gallery next to Marcus and Jennifer, watching as Carpenter presented our case. He methodically walked Judge Bellamy through the timeline, showing how the liens had been recorded without homeowner knowledge or consent, how board members were blaming each other, and how $2 million had seemingly vanished. Your Honor, Carpenter concluded, 40 families are at imminent risk of losing their homes through no fault of their own. Someone with access to the HOA's authority perpetrated a massive fraud, and we need the court's protection while we investigate and pursue justice. The attorney for Silver Peak Management Company, a slick-looking man named Harrison Drake, argued that his client was an innocent lender who had relied on what appeared to be properly authorized HOA documents. We conducted due diligence, Your Honor. We verified the HOA's authority to borrow. We confirmed the property descriptions. We had everything properly notarized. My client is a victim here, too. Judge Bellamy fixed Drake with a skeptical look. Counselor, are you telling me your client loaned $2 million without verifying that the people signing had actual authority to encumber 40 separate properties? We verified the board positions, Your Honor. Did you contact any of the homeowners? Drake hesitated. That's not standard practice in HOA loans, Your Honor. The HOA has the authority to act on behalf of the community. In normal circumstances, perhaps, Judge Bellamy said dryly. But this court finds the circumstances here far from normal. Motion granted. All funds from the Silver Peak loan are frozen pending investigation. Silver Peak Management Company and any related entities are prohibited from taking any action to enforce the liens. The notary, Beverly Strickland, is ordered to appear for a deposition within 7 days. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks for a status conference. The relief in that courtroom was palpable. Jennifer grabbed my arm and squeezed. Marcus exhaled loudly. We weren't safe yet, but we had bought ourselves time. The investigation moved quickly after that. Carpenter hired a forensic accountant named Thomas Reed to trace the money. Reed subpoenaed the HOA's bank records and discovered that $2 million had indeed been deposited into the association's operating account on June 23rd. The very next day, a series of wire transfers had moved the money out in smaller increments. $300,000 went to a company called Desert Renovations, LLC. Another $400,000 went to Peak Property Solutions. $500,000 went to an account registered to someone named Sandra Hoffman. The remaining $800,000 was withdrawn in a complex series of transfers that bounced through multiple accounts. Sandra Hoffman, Marcus said when we gathered at his house to hear Reed's preliminary findings. Same last name as Patricia. Daughter? Sister? Reed nodded. Daughter. Sandra Hoffman is Patricia's 28-year-old daughter. She lives in Los Angeles and works as a marketing consultant, or at least that's what her LinkedIn profile says. What about these companies? I asked. Desert Renovations and Peak Property? Both registered in Nevada within the past year. Both list Patricia Hoffman as the registered agent. I'm still tracking down the bank accounts, but I'm willing to bet the money ultimately flows back to Patricia or her family. Jennifer pounded her fist on the table. She stole $2 million from us, from 40 families. How did she think she'd get away with this? Arrogance, Reed suggested. Or desperation, or both. I've seen embezzlers convince themselves they're just borrowing the money, that they'll pay it back before anyone notices. But $2 million? That's not small-time desperation. That's calculated theft. The notary deposition happened on a Tuesday morning in Carpenter's office. Beverly Strickland turned out to be a 62-year-old mobile notary who traveled around Las Vegas notarizing documents for a fee. She arrived with her own attorney and immediately invoked her Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination on every question related to the Silver Peak documents. Did you notarize the loan documents for Sunset Ridge HOA? I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege. Did Patricia Hoffman pay you to notarize these documents? I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege. Did you witness the signatures on these documents, as your notary seal indicates? I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege. Carpenter remained calm throughout, but I could see the frustration in his eyes. After 30 minutes of identical answers, he paused and said, Ms. Strickland, I want to be very clear about something. My clients are homeowners who had their properties fraudulently encumbered. The Clark County District Attorney's Office has been notified of this case. If you participated in fraud or perjury, your notary commission is the least of your worries. However, if you cooperate now and provide truthful testimony, that cooperation will be noted. Would you like a moment to consult with your attorney? Strickland and her lawyer stepped into the hallway. When they returned 15 minutes later, Strickland's demeanor had changed. She looked smaller, frightened. I'm willing to testify, she said quietly, but I want immunity. That statement changed everything. Within days, Carpenter had negotiated a cooperation agreement with the district attorney's office. Beverly Strickland would testify truthfully about her involvement in exchange for immunity from prosecution. And what she told us made the whole scheme clear. Patricia Hoffman had contacted Strickland in May, claiming she needed help with some HOA paperwork. Patricia explained that the board had approved a loan for major community renovations, but that getting all 40 homeowners to sign would be logistically impossible. She asked if Strickland could notarize the documents based on the board's authority alone. Strickland, who had worked as a mobile notary for 20 years without incident, was skeptical. I told her it didn't sound right, Strickland testified during a subsequent hearing, but she showed me what looked like official board meeting minutes approving the loan. She showed me the HOA's bylaws and claimed they gave the board authority to act on behalf of homeowners. She paid me $5,000 cash to notarize everything. I knew it was wrong, but I told myself it was technically legal if the board really had that authority. Did you witness actual signatures? Carpenter asked. No, Strickland admitted, tears streaming down her face. Patricia signed everything herself, all the documents, all the names. I notarized her signature on each one, certifying that she was signing on behalf of the HOA. It was wrong. I knew it was wrong. But $5,000 was more than I usually make in 3 months, and my husband had just lost his job. The courtroom was silent except for Strickland's quiet crying. Judge Bellamy's expression was impossible to read. Armed with Strickland's testimony, the district attorney obtained a search warrant for Patricia Hoffman's home. I wasn't there for the search, but the news coverage showed investigators carrying out boxes of documents, computers, and files. Patricia herself was photographed being led away in handcuffs, her face hidden behind her hands. The documents seized from Patricia's home confirmed the entire scheme. Investigators found the forged board meeting minutes, practice signatures where Patricia had learned to mimic other board members' handwriting, and most damning of all, her personal financial records showing deposits that matched the amounts wired from the HOA account. But the investigation revealed something even more disturbing. Linda Walsh, the HOA treasurer, had known about the fraud. Email exchanges between Patricia and Linda showed that Linda had actively helped structure the loan to avoid detection. Linda had suggested using multiple smaller wire transfers instead of a few large ones, had helped identify which properties to use as collateral based on their equity values, and had received $200,000 for her cooperation. Gregory Banks, the secretary, appeared to be innocent. He had been serving on the board mostly to get his quarterly dues reduced in rarely attended meetings. Donald Simmons, the vice president, had been traveling extensively for work and had signed various documents electronically without reading them carefully, trusting Patricia to handle day-to-day operations. By early October, the criminal charges were filed. Patricia Hoffman faced 40 counts of fraud, 40 counts of forgery, 40 counts of filing false documents, theft over $100,000, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Linda Walsh faced similar charges as an accomplice. Beverly Strickland, because of her cooperation agreement, faced only a suspension of her notary commission and probation. The civil case moved forward in parallel. Thomas Reed, the forensic accountant, had managed to trace most of the missing funds. The $300,000 paid to Desert Renovations LLC had been used by Patricia to renovate her vacation home in Sedona, Arizona. The $400,000 to Peak Property Solutions had purchased a condo in San Diego that Patricia's son was living in. The $500,000 to Sandra Hoffman's account had been partially spent on a new Mercedes and a down payment on a house in Pasadena, though Sandra claimed she had no idea the money was stolen. The remaining $800,000 proved harder to track. It had been moved through a series of shell companies and offshore accounts. Reed believed much of it had been spent on personal expenses, gambling, and lifestyle improvements, but documenting every transaction would take months. In mid-October, Carpenter filed a motion for summary judgment on the fraud claims. The evidence was overwhelming. Patricia's own documents proved she had orchestrated the scheme, Linda's emails proved her participation, and Strickland's testimony proved the notarization was fraudulent. There was no genuine dispute of material fact. Judge Bellamy agreed. In a blistering 20-page order, she granted summary judgment in favor of all 40 homeowners. The liens were declared void and ordered removed from the county records immediately. Patricia Hoffman and Linda Walsh were jointly and severally liable for $2 million plus interest and attorney fees. The HOA itself was found to have inadequate internal controls and was ordered to implement new safeguards, though the judge acknowledged the homeowners were victims, not responsible parties. But winning the judgment was only half the battle. Patricia and Linda had already spent most of the money. Patricia's assets were seized, including her primary residence, her Sedona vacation home, her vehicles, and her bank accounts. Linda's assets were similarly frozen and liquidated. But even after selling everything, the recovered amount totaled only about $800,000. "What about Sandra Hoffman?" Jennifer demanded during a meeting with Carpenter. "She got $500,000. Her mother stole from us to give her that money." "Sandra has her own attorney, and they're arguing she was an innocent recipient," Carpenter explained. "She claims her mother told her it was a legitimate loan against Patricia's own properties. Proving Sandra knew the money was stolen is difficult." "But she kept it," I said. "Even after the story broke, even after her mother was arrested, she kept the money." "And we're pursuing her," Carpenter assured us. "But these things take time. Her attorney is dragging out every procedural step, and she's filed for bankruptcy protection, which complicates matters." The bankruptcy filing infuriated all of us, but Carpenter explained that Patricia and Linda would likely file for bankruptcy too. "Bankruptcy won't discharge fraudulent debts," he said. But it will delay collection and force us to fight in bankruptcy court as well as district court. It's a common tactic. The criminal trial began in January. I attended every day I could, sitting in the gallery with Marcus, Jennifer, and a rotating group of other homeowners. Patricia Hoffman looked diminished in her orange jumpsuit, her formerly confident demeanor replaced by a defeated slump. Linda Walsh sat at a separate defense table, her attorney having negotiated a cooperation deal where she would testify against Patricia in exchange for reduced charges. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They presented the forged documents, the financial records, the email exchanges, and Beverly Strickland's testimony about the fraudulent notarization. Linda Walsh took the stand and confirmed that Patricia had orchestrated everything, though Linda tried to minimize her own role as merely following instructions. Patricia's attorney attempted to argue that she had intended to pay back the money, that she had been under extreme financial pressure due to her husband's medical bills and her son's legal troubles. The defense painted Patricia as a desperate woman who made terrible choices, not a calculating criminal. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours, guilty on all counts. Patricia Hoffman was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Linda Walsh received 7 years. Judge Bellamy, presiding over the sentencing, did not mince words. "Ms. Hoffman, you held a position of trust in your community," the judge said. 40 families relied on you to manage their HOA responsibly and ethically. Instead, you betrayed that trust in the most fundamental way possible. You stole their money, you fraudulently encumbered their homes, and you put families at risk of losing everything they had worked for. This was not a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a calculated, sustained fraud that took planning and repeated criminal acts. The sentence reflects the severity of your crimes and the harm you caused. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us for comments. Jennifer, who had become our de facto spokesperson, spoke calmly into the cameras. "We're relieved that justice has been served, but our fight isn't over. We still haven't recovered all of the stolen money, and many families in our community have suffered significant financial and emotional harm. We want this case to be a warning to other HOA boards that homeowners are watching and will hold you accountable." By March, we had recovered approximately $1.2 million through asset seizures and liquidations. It wasn't the full $2 million, but Carpenter had negotiated a settlement with Silver Peak Management Company, where they agreed to absorb $400,000 of the loss in exchange for being released from the lawsuit. The company's due diligence had been sloppy at best, and they wanted to avoid further litigation and bad publicity. That left a shortfall of $400,000 that would likely never be recovered. Carpenter proposed distributing the recovered funds proportionally based on the amount each homeowner had been encumbered. It wasn't perfect, but it was fair. I received a check for $41,000, representing 82% of the lien that had been placed against my home. The remaining $9,000 was gone, absorbed by legal fees, bankruptcy proceedings, and the portions that were simply unrecoverable. $9,000 was a significant loss, but it was better than $50,000 and infinitely better than losing my home entirely. The Sunset Ridge HOA underwent a complete restructuring. All remaining board members resigned, and a special election installed new leadership with a mandate for transparency and accountability. The new board implemented quarterly financial audits, required dual authorization for any transaction over $1,000, and established a homeowner oversight committee with direct access to all HOA records. Marcus Chen was elected as the new president. He ran on a platform of trust but verify and won by an overwhelming margin. Jennifer Holbrook became treasurer, bringing her real estate expertise to bear on managing the association's finances. I was asked to join the oversight committee, and after some hesitation, I agreed. After everything we had been through, I felt a responsibility to help prevent anything like this from happening again. The homeowner oversight committee met monthly in Marcus's living room, the same place where we had gathered almost a year earlier after discovering the lien notices. We reviewed bank statements, approved major expenditures, and ensured that the new board was operating transparently. The first few meetings were tense, with homeowners still raw from the experience, but gradually we found our rhythm. One evening in late April, as our committee meeting wrapped up, Jennifer poured coffee for the remaining attendees and raised her mug in a toast. To surviving Patricia Hoffman and her schemes, to fighting back, and to making sure it never happens again. We clinked coffee mugs around Marcus's kitchen table. Robert Martinez, who had seemed the most angry throughout the ordeal, actually smiled. You know what the craziest part is? We're better neighbors now than we were before. I didn't know most of you a year ago. Now I'd trust you with my life. It was true. The fraud had forged connections between 40 families who might otherwise have lived side by side for decades without really knowing each other. We had group chats now, regular barbecues, and a genuine sense of community. Kids played together in yards while parents kept watch. When someone's car broke down, neighbors offered rides without being asked. When someone fell behind on their mortgage payment because of the legal fees, others quietly helped out. The experience had changed me too. After my wife died, I'd withdrawn into myself, going through the motions of work and home maintenance without really engaging with the world. Fighting Patricia's fraud had forced me back into life, given me a purpose beyond just getting through each day. I found myself looking forward to the committee meetings, to seeing neighbors at the community pool, to being part of something larger than my own grief. In June, we held a community celebration marking 1 year since the liens had been recorded. It was both a remembrance of the difficult year and a celebration of our resilience. Marcus arranged for a local restaurant to cater tacos and barbecue. Someone set up a sound system and played music. Kids ran through sprinklers while adults talked and laughed in the evening heat. Andrew Carpenter attended as our guest of honor. He had become more than just our attorney over the past year. He had guided us through the darkest moments, celebrated our victories, and worked tirelessly to recover as much money as possible. When he arrived, homeowners lined up to shake his hand and thank him personally. "You saved our homes," Catherine Frost told him, tears in her eyes. "I don't know how we can ever repay you." Carpenter smiled warmly. "You already have. You trusted me, you worked together, and you didn't give up when things got difficult. That's all any attorney can ask for. Plus, your case has already changed HOA law in Nevada. The state legislature passed new regulations requiring third-party audits for any HOA that manages more than 25 units and mandating homeowner notification before any major financial transaction. You didn't just save your own homes, you protected thousands of other homeowners across the state. That thought had never occurred to me. We had been so focused on our own situation that I hadn't considered the broader implications. But Carpenter was right. Our fight had exposed a vulnerability in the system and forced changes that would prevent similar frauds in the future. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and purple, I stood on Marcus's patio and looked out at my neighbors. 40 families, brought together by fraud and betrayal, but united in their determination to fight back. We had hired one attorney, pooled our resources, and taken on a corrupt HOA president who thought she could steal our homes with impunity. We had won. The legal battle wasn't completely over. Sandra Hoffman's bankruptcy case was still working through the courts, and there were ongoing negotiations about asset recovery. But the immediate crisis had passed. Our homes were safe. The criminals were in prison. The HOA was reformed, and our community was stronger than ever. Jennifer found me on the patio and handed me a fresh beer. "You're being awfully quiet. Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, "just thinking about how different things are now compared to a year ago, how close we came to losing everything." "But we didn't lose," Jennifer reminded me. "We fought back and we won. That's what matters. Did you ever imagine when you got that first lien notice that we'd end up here? All of us together, having actually changed state law?" Jennifer laughed. "Hell no. When I got that notice, I thought it was a clerical error. Then I thought it was identity theft. It took me way too long to realize it was something much worse. But you know what? I'm glad we went through it together. Awful as it was, it showed me what people are capable of when they work together." Marcus joined us on the patio, carrying a plate loaded with tacos. "You two look way too serious for a party. Come on, we're about to do karaoke. Robert is going to sing Sweet Caroline. And it's going to be either amazing or terrible. But either way, we need to witness it. We followed Marcus inside, where Robert Martinez was indeed stepping up to the microphone with the confidence of someone who had either had too many beers or genuinely believed in his karaoke abilities. The opening notes started, and Robert launched into an enthusiastic, if slightly off-key rendition that had everyone laughing and singing along by the chorus. I found myself singing too, surrounded by neighbors who had become friends in a home that was truly mine again, free of fraudulent liens and the fear that had dominated so much of the past year. Patricia Hoffman had tried to steal from us, tried to put 40 families at risk to fund her own selfish desires. But she had failed. Not because we were particularly heroic or special, but because we had refused to be victims, had banded together, and had trusted in the legal system to deliver justice. The next morning, I drove to the county recorder's office with a strange request. I wanted to see my property record, to verify with my own eyes that the lien was truly gone. The clerk looked at me oddly, but pulled up the record on her computer screen. There it was, my property description, my name as the owner, and a notation dated 3 months prior that formally released the fraudulent lien. The document was clean again, no encumbrances, no clouds on the title. "Everything look correct?" the clerk asked. "Perfect," I said. "Absolutely perfect." I drove home through Henderson's morning traffic, past the shopping centers and schools and parks that made up the familiar landscape of my daily life. Sunset Ridge Estates looked exactly as it had a year ago, the same Spanish-style homes and palm trees and manicured lawns. But everything was different now. The community that had seemed like just a collection of houses had become something real, bound together by shared adversity and collective action. Over the following months, life gradually returned to normal, or at least to a new version of normal. I went back to my electrical contracting work, rewiring houses and troubleshooting problems. But now when I saw HOA notices on job sites, I made a point to mention our story to the homeowners. "Make sure you're reviewing your HOA's finances," I would tell them. "Get copies of the budget, check the bank statements, and ask questions if anything seems off. Don't assume the board is acting in your best interest. Verify it." Some people thanked me for the advice. Others looked at me like I was paranoid. But a few listened with the intensity of people who recognized the warning signs in their own communities. I gave those people Andrew Carpenter's card and encouraged them to be proactive before small problems became major fraud. In September, a year and a half after discovering the initial lien notice, I received a final check from the bankruptcy proceedings. Sandra Hoffman's bankruptcy had been dismissed after the court found she had hidden assets. The judgment against her had been enforced, and after liquidating her condo and repossessing the Mercedes, the bankruptcy trustee had distributed the recovered funds to the creditors. My share was an additional $6,000. Combined with the earlier distributions, I had now recovered $47,000 of the original $50,000 fraudulent lien. The remaining $3,000 represented money that was simply gone, spent on Patricia's lifestyle and unrecoverable despite everyone's best efforts. I could accept that. $3,000 was a painful but manageable loss, especially compared to what could have happened. The final piece of closure came in October, when the Nevada State Bar held a ceremony honoring attorneys who had made significant contributions to protecting homeowners' rights. Andrew Carpenter was one of the recipients, recognized specifically for his work on our case. Marcus, Jennifer, and I attended the ceremony at a hotel ballroom in Las Vegas, watching as Carpenter accepted the award and gave a speech about the importance of holding HOAs accountable. "Homeowner associations serve a valuable purpose," Carpenter told the audience of attorneys and judges. "They maintain common areas, enforce reasonable standards, and help preserve property values. But they also wield tremendous power over people's homes and lives. When that power is abused, when board members forget that they are fiduciaries with legal and ethical obligations, the results can be devastating." The Sunset Ridge case demonstrated both the vulnerability of homeowners and their resilience when they band together to fight back. I'm honored to have represented them, and I hope their story inspires other homeowners to stay vigilant and other attorneys to take on these important cases. The audience applauded, and I felt a surge of pride, not just in Carpenter, though he certainly deserved the recognition, but in all of us. 40 families who had refused to be victims, who had pooled their money to hire an attorney when they could barely afford it, who had attended court hearings and reviewed financial documents and testified when needed. We had done that. We had made a difference. After the ceremony, Carpenter invited us to join him for drinks at the hotel bar. We sat in a corner booth, talking and laughing about the case like veterans recounting old war stories. The terror of those first few weeks had faded into memory, replaced by a sense of accomplishment and relief. "Can I ask you something?" I said to Carpenter. "When we first came to you, when you saw the lien notices and heard our story, did you think we had a real chance of winning?" Carpenter took a sip of his whiskey and considered the question. "Honestly, I thought you had a good case, but I was worried about the practical realities. Even if we won, would we be able to recover the money? Patricia and Linda could have hidden assets offshore or spent everything before we could seize it. You could have won every legal battle and still lost your homes if the money was gone, but you had to try. Walking away wasn't an option." "No," Marcus agreed. "It wasn't." "The thing that impressed me most," Carpenter continued, was your unity. 40 families is a lot of people with a lot of different opinions and circumstances. But you stayed together. You trusted each other and trusted me. That's rare. I've seen cases with just 2 or 3 plaintiffs fall apart because people couldn't agree on strategy or got impatient with the legal process. You didn't do that." Jennifer raised her glass. "To unity, to fighting the good fight, and to never, ever trusting an HOA president without verification." We laughed and clinked glasses, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Contentment. Not happiness exactly, not the uncomplicated joy of earlier years before loss and betrayal, but something deeper and more durable. The satisfaction of having faced a crisis and emerged intact. The pride of having stood up for what was right. The comfort of genuine friendships forged in adversity. The next morning, I woke early and drove out to Henderson's Wetlands Preserve, a place I had discovered during the darkest days after my wife's death. The preserve was a pocket of green life in the desert, with walking trails that wound through marshes and ponds where migratory birds stopped to rest. I had walked these trails countless times, finding solace in the quiet beauty of the place. This morning, I walked with a different feeling, not seeking solace or escape, but celebrating resilience. As I watched a great blue heron fishing in the shallows, I thought about Patricia Hoffman sitting in a prison cell, about the 40 families going about their daily lives in homes that were truly theirs, about the HOA board meetings now conducted with transparency and accountability. The fraud had been a violation, a betrayal that had shaken our sense of security and trust, but we had refused to let that violation define us. We had fought back, held the criminals accountable, recovered most of the stolen money, and reformed the system to prevent future abuses. We had transformed from victims into advocates, from isolated neighbors into a genuine community. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Committee meeting next Tuesday at 7. Please confirm you can attend. Need to review the landscape contract bids." I texted back confirmation, smiled, and continued my walk through the preserve. The great blue heron took flight, its enormous wings carrying it across the pond to hunt in new waters. I watched it disappear into the morning light, then turned back toward the parking lot and the day ahead. Life in Sunset Ridge Estates continued. Children played in yards and splashed in the community pool. Homeowners mowed lawns and washed cars and argued about whether the speed limit on residential streets should be 20 or 25 miles per hour. The HOA collected dues and paid for landscaping and scheduled the annual community garage sale. Everything looked normal, ordinary, unremarkable. But beneath that ordinary surface was something stronger, a community that had been tested and had passed the test. 40 families who knew they could count on each other when it mattered. An HOA board that understood it served at the pleasure of the homeowners, not the other way around, and a collective determination that Patricia Hoffman's fraud would be the last time anyone tried to steal from Sunset Ridge Estates. 2 years after discovering the lien notice, I stood in my backyard on a Saturday afternoon, grilling burgers for a neighborhood barbecue. Marcus and Jennifer were setting up tables on my patio. Robert Martinez was teaching a group of kids how to throw a football. Catherine Frost was making her famous potato salad in my kitchen. 20 people would be here within the hour, all neighbors from Sunset Ridge, all people I now counted as friends. I flipped the burgers and watched smoke rise into the clear Nevada sky. My wife would have loved this, I thought. She had always believed in the importance of community, of people looking out for each other. When she died, I had let those connections wither, too wrapped up in grief to maintain relationships that required effort. Patricia's fraud had forced me back into community whether I wanted it or not, and somewhere along the way, I had rediscovered what my wife had always known. We need each other. We're stronger together than apart. The doorbell rang, and I heard Jennifer welcoming the first arrivals. Voices filled the house, laughter echoed from the patio, and the backyard began to fill with neighbors carrying dishes and six-packs and bags of chips. Someone turned on music, kids ran through the sprinklers. Adults fell into easy conversations about work and family and the upcoming election for HOA board positions. I served burgers hot off the grill, accepted compliments on my cooking skills, and felt the simple pleasure of being part of something larger than myself. This was what Patricia Hoffman had tried to steal from us, not just money or property, but the security and stability that allows communities to thrive. She had failed. We had made certain of that. As evening approached and the desert heat began to fade, I found myself in a lawn chair next to Marcus, both of us nursing beers and watching the party continue around us. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't made that first phone call?" Marcus asked. "If we hadn't organized that first meeting?" "All the time," I admitted. "If even a few families had tried to fight it alone, they would have been overwhelmed. It was expensive enough with 40 of us splitting the costs. One person trying to take on Patricia and the HOA. They would have been buried in legal fees." "We got lucky too," Marcus pointed out. "Carpenter was the right attorney at the right time. Strickland agreed to testify. The district attorney took the case seriously. A lot of things could have gone wrong." "But they didn't," I said. "We made our own luck by standing together and refusing to give up." Marcus clinked his beer bottle against mine. "To standing together. And to making sure we never have to do it again." The party continued into the evening, neighbors lingering long after the food was gone, reluctant to end the gathering. When people finally began to leave, they did so with hugs and promises to do this again soon. I stood on my front porch, waving goodbye as families walked home under the streetlights, their voices carrying in the quiet night. Jennifer was the last to leave. She paused at my front door and said, "You know what the real victory was? Not the lawsuit or the criminal convictions or even recovering the money. It was this. All of us still here, still together, still trusting each other after everything that happened. Patricia tried to break us, but she made us stronger instead." "I hadn't thought about it that way," I said. "But you're right." "Of course I'm right," Jennifer said with a grin. "I'm always right. Ask my husband." I laughed and watched her walk down the driveway to her car. After she drove away, I went back inside and started cleaning up. The kitchen was a disaster. My backyard looked like a tornado had hit it, and I was exhausted. But it was a good exhaustion, the kind that comes from meaningful effort and genuine connection. I loaded the dishwasher, put away the leftover food, and carried garbage bags out to the curb. The neighborhood was quiet now, lights glowing in windows, families settling in for the night. Somewhere in a federal prison in California, Patricia Hoffman was living in a cell, serving 15 years for her crimes. Somewhere in another prison, Linda Walsh was counting down her 7-year sentence, and here in Henderson, Nevada, 40 families were living their lives in homes that were secure, protected, and truly theirs. The battle had been long and difficult and expensive and stressful. But we had won. We had discovered the fraud, exposed the criminals, recovered the money, and reformed the system. We had done it together, 40 families and one attorney, proving that ordinary people can fight back against corruption and win. As I locked my front door and headed to bed, I felt grateful. Grateful for neighbors who had become friends, grateful for an attorney who had believed in our case, grateful for a legal system that, despite its flaws and delays, had ultimately delivered justice, and grateful for the resilience that had carried us through the darkest moments into this new chapter. Sunset Ridge Estates would never be the same as it was before Patricia's fraud. Too much had happened, too many illusions had been shattered. But it was better now, more authentic, more connected, more vigilant. We had learned that trust must be earned and verified, that authority must be questioned and monitored, and that communities are strongest when members look out for each other. In the end, that was Patricia Hoffman's legacy. Not the fraud she'd committed or the money she had stolen, but the community she had inadvertently created in her wake. 40 families who would never again take their security for granted, who would always read the HOA financial statements carefully, who would show up at board meetings and ask hard questions and hold leaders accountable. We had discovered our HOA secretly borrowed against members' homes. 40 families hired one attorney, and together we had fought back and won. That story would be told and retold in living rooms and community meetings and HOA board gatherings across Nevada and beyond, a reminder that corruption thrives in silence but crumbles in the face of collective action. I fell asleep that night with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years, knowing that my home was safe, my community was strong, and justice had been served. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new responsibilities, but tonight, all was well in Sunset Ridge Estates.